Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Hey everybody, welcome to After Action Report, your recap show for all Showdown matches to keep you caught up on all the action. I am your host, Megs, here for the Call to Action podcast channel. Today, unfortunately, I don't have my usual co-host, Danny, with me, but rest assured, we are still going to be breaking down all the stats, all the storylines from Friday Night Titans, episode 6. Starting off with the first scene, Christian Harloff is seen, and he welcomes in Shannon Barney and Mike Kalinowski to sit down and chat. As they're going along, they feel like Christian's buttering them up towards something. Christian proceeds to lay out the different paths available to Mike Kalinowski this season. In IG, it is confirmed that Smets will be a number one contender, but we're just waiting to find out who he will be facing in that number one contender match to see who will come up against Mike Kalinowski for his first defense of the season. In teams, he is still having trouble finding a number one contender for Corruption to play, and lays out the terms that Koi had presented in a previous episode. Shazam is willing to face Corruption in a straight-up title match, but with the stipulation that if Corruption loses, they have to break up as a team. But the third and final path that Mike could take is actually a singles route. But in order to start that path, he would have to face Paige for Betty. And Christian leaves the scene with giving Shannon and Mike a lot to think about. So to start off with some of the stuff we already knew, like the stipulation for the Corruption match that has now been officially presented to Shannon. We don't know yet what her decision is, but we weren't quite sure about the IG path. Now we know where that stands, and we're going to wait and see how that all plays out. Singles is going to be interesting. I loved how Shannon and Mike both really didn't quite have an idea who Paige was, and we kind of end that scene of, is this a good thing or a bad thing, with Mike having to face Paige? Neither of them were really sure. But that was a fun scene to see. Let's jump into our next one. And we see Christian Harloff again being confronted by Rager Radis, who is very upset about what was allowed to happen last episode. Harloff seems confused, but Radis keeps insisting and will not let go that he feels cheated, even though technically he set the rules for the stipulation match last week. Now, Christian does understand that having Andrew Guy come back to manage Ben is going to be upsetting potentially for him and for Brother Lomas, but offers Lomas an IG match against Elena Jordan. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the FCL, Elena Jordan is actually someone who has been competing in the FCL all of this past season. She was in a IG match in the MTS several years ago, but most recently we've been seeing her in the FCL, and you know her as the Punisher. More on that once we actually get into the match. And speaking of, let's jump right into what we saw. Coming out of round one, Brother Lomas is up by 4, 9-5. Brother Lomas defers to have Elena spin first, who she spins away from Swashbuckling Adventure and Pulp and ends up taking Hasbro. Elena comes away with 1 out of 10 available points. She misses the first 3 questions for 2 points, checks down to multiple choice on the remaining 2, and misses one of those multiple choice questions. 2 of the 2-point questions and 1 of the multiple choice checkdowns are stolen by Brother Lomas for a total of 5 points. This comes to Lomas' spin, who spins away from Alien and Predator, but ends up taking TMNT. Lomas comes away with 7 out of 8 available points. Hold on, this isn't a typo. He checks down the multiple choice on 1 question, but does not give away any steal opportunities. Now, mathematically, because of the steal opportunities and how far ahead he was in round 1, Lomas does not have to answer that 5th question in round 2 and gives him the win via KO with a final score of 21-6, where Elena Jordan answered 6 of 15 questions for 40% accuracy and scored 29% of 21 available points. Brother Lomas answered 16 of 18 questions for 89% accuracy and scored 81% of 26 available points. Now, I will point out that Elena did score 21 pun points all throughout the match, but unfortunately it was not enough to translate into Schmodown points to where she was able to push Brother Lomas to have to answer any round 3 questions. Brother Lomas was impressive here in this first match, and I'm looking forward to what he has to offer, and if he is going to be continuing to play in the IG, what kind of competitor he has to face. Leave down in the comments who you think Brother Lomas should face next. But we are moving on into our next scene where we see Ben Bateman doing some prep for his upcoming match. Radis comes sauntering in, going on and on about how great he is. stops some random guy to ask some tough trivia questions, and Radis proceeds to keep getting question after question right, much to Bateman's confusion, and he ends up leaving. But then we find out that Radis actually wrote the questions and got this guy to read the questions for him. So apparently Radis now owes some guy $175. I don't know. This was a lot of fun to watch. You weren't quite sure where it was going. Do we think Ben Bateman got rattled a little bit in this? Seeing Radis rattle off all those questions that he was struggling to get? Let's find out what happens during the match. But let's jump into the preamble where we see Rick Radis giving out candy to the audience and the audience proceeding to throw it back. Poor Ken Knapsack just wanted a snack. Poor guy, I felt bad for him. Then you see Andrew Guy and Ben Bateman come in. Andrew Guy coming in with the bongos and proceeds to go and get a large whiteboard after production attempts to give Ben a regular size board. Finally getting into the match itself, coming out of round one, Radis is up by 9-10, where the Rager was able to get a perfect round one, but missed out on the bonus question. Coming into round two, Radis defers to have Bateman spin first. He spins away from Spike Lee and ends up taking DreamWorks animation. Bateman comes away with 7 out of 10 points, checking down to multiple choice twice, misses one of those questions on multiple choice, and has it stolen for 1 point by the Rager. On the Rager spin, he spins away from James Stewart and ends up taking the 1990s. He's able to come away with 3 out of 10 points. He checks down to multiple choice on 4 questions, misses 3 of those questions, and all 3 are stolen for 3 points by Bateman. Now, given the steals and the differences in their accumulated points in their respective rounds, Bateman now has a gain of 6 points to now be up by 5, 19-14. Now, before we move into round 3, I want to make special note of a question inside of Ben Bateman's round 2. If you notice, there was a question about The Secret Life of Pets, which actually is not a DreamWorks animation movie. Ben's able to get the question right, and you see that Guy and Ben are having a conversation, but nothing happens. The round proceeds on. Ben misses a question on multiple choice. After that question is asked, Guy then comes in and proceeds to try and challenge the question that was asked about The Secret Life of Pets. Now, according to the rules, a question cannot be challenged once they've moved on to the next preceding question, so the challenge was quickly thrown out and nothing came of it. But think about the strategy of that. You're pointing out an error in the match, even though your competitor did capitalize on it. And it also gives your competitor, who just missed a question, a little bit of breathing room. Something to think about. So to start off round 3, Rick Radis misses a 2-pointer in Oscars, but is able to hit his 3-pointer and 5-pointer in Tom Cruise and Animated, respectively. This bounces it back over to Bateman, who answers a 2-pointer in The Scotts. That's Ridley and Tony Scott, by the way. And then proceeds to hit a 3-pointer in the 2000s, which is enough to give him the win with a final score of 24-22, where Ben Bateman answered 18 of 20 questions for 90% accuracy and scored 83% of 29 available points. Rick Radis answered 15 of 20 questions for 75% accuracy and scored 69% of 32 available points. Now, this match felt like Team Action versus The Reckoning all over again. We had all 4 competitors back, though Ben Bateman and Rick Radis were the only ones answering questions. You still saw Brother Lomas and Andrew Guy going at it, and it was a ton of fun to watch. A lot of fun liners out of there. Leave in the comments what your favorite moment from this match was. But also thinking about the trivia aspect, there was a lot of up and downs during the game as well. We see Radis was able to be up coming out of round 1, but then things shifted when you get into round 2, where Bateman does have to go first, and he is able to get through the round mostly unscathed, except for a 1-point steal. And then we get to Rick Radis' spin, where he gets a broad category, which in times past, over the past couple seasons, we've seen competitors do very well in. But the problem with those pesky broad categories is sometimes you get those questions that you just don't know. And Radis does give up 3 points worth of steals there, which then swings things back into Ben Bateman's favor going into that 3rd round, Radis misses that 2-pointer in the third round, but he comes back and finishes out the round strong with his 3 and his 5-pointer, which does force Ben Damon to have to answer a few questions, but he does avoid having to hit that 5. And I will make note that Andrew had a nice little fun quip in his post-match interview where he said, onward and upward, a little jab at Radis for having answered Onward as an Academy Award-winning film in Oscars. Speaking of that post-match interview, we do get confirmation. Now, you never say never in the Schmodown, but as of right now, Guy is stepping down from managing and competing and will be returning to the desk. Now, can't be sad about that. It was really nice to see him both compete and in a managing role, which he did very well in both. But it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic back on the desk with Mark having now seen this other side of Guy come back. Is that going to change Guy's dynamic getting in on the desk? Leave comments with your thoughts. But we're not done yet with the drama. We see after the post-match interviews that Adam Witt and Paige for Betty come crashing in, and Witt introduces her as the newest member of the fan favorites as the Boston Badass. And Paige then proceeds to challenge Mike Kalinowski to a singles match. We'll see if she is able to topple another legend in the game, which does follow along with the path that Kristen Harloff laid out at the beginning of the episode, where if Mike wants a shot at the singles title, he has to get through Paige first. Our final scene of the match, we see Jacoby outside prepping and psyching himself up to go talk to somebody. He turns the corner, and there's Mark Riley, very intently examining a wall of leaves? ? Jacoby asks about Riley helping him get a match. Riley stops him, tells him after. Jacoby's confused, starts walking away. Riley then stopping him and asking, "Who are you?" After some fumbling around by Jacoby, he finally leaves and leaves Riley to his plans. Now, I found this scene so endearing because if you remember Schmodown history, back in 2017, when Riley became the first 2-time singles champion, his entrance was "You're the best around," coming out in a gi dressed up as Daniel LaRusso. Now, we see him in this scene proceeding to show kind of a Mr. Miyagi persona, with Jacoby taking on the role of Daniel LaRusso from The Karate Kid. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Riley now becomes a mentor to Jacoby throughout the rest of the season. And also the "who are you" question is also a throwback to Dan Murrell talking to Andrew Guy when Drew calls out Murrell, and Murrell is revealed as part of the Five Horsemen and his big return to the Schmodown in 2018. And that's going to do it for this episode of Friday Night Titans. But don't worry, I'm going to be right back next week breaking down the next episode. Before you leave, make sure that you have hit like on this video, you are subscribed to the channel, and you're being notified every time we drop new videos on this channel. Be sure to leave comments both here and at the socials that are listed down below. The match breakdowns that I presented here will be posted to Twitter and Facebook. Until next time, for the entire Call to Action podcast crew, I'm your host, Megs, and this is After Action Report, signing off.